Hard as it may be for some of us to believe, it was 50 years ago tomorrow that National Public Radio first took to the airwaves. Now known simply as NPR, it's still thriving and striving, as one of its founding mothers tells Faith Salie.
Countries around the world are able to vaccinate.
That's the sound of NPR.
Eventually
there
make everyone vulnerable again.
The sound of NPR means many different things to its 60 million weekly followers.
We heard from a few Black Americans about their reaction to this week's verdict in the Chauvin trial and what they think it means.
In-depth news coverage.
NPR Morning Edition.
This is All Things Considered.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Music's biggest stars come to NPR headquarters in Washington, D.C. to play for staff members and millions of fans at tiny desk concerts. And there's even a weekly quiz show, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
First, let's hear from Faith Salie.
You may recognize some of the panelists. I've been on Wait for a dozen years. It all began 50 years ago. What was it like to be at NPR in 1971?
Oh, golly, it was all raw and new and so exciting. We had no resources. We had no idea what we were doing, and we went on the air.
Susan Stamberg was there on day one, hired as a tape editor.
Around our daily terror, we really did realize that we were inventing something that had not existed.
The look of an artist.
Very soon, she became the co-host of All Things Considered and the first woman in the country to anchor a national nightly news program.
At her easel, her palette knife loaded with the colors she's mixed, applying them with joy and concentration.
To me, she's the voice of NPR that I wanted.
As its first director of programming, Bill Siemering had a very specific vision for the sound of NPR shows.
And this made people uneasy.
Why?
We had a network, and so they were expecting it to sound like CBS, and it didn't.
Siemering, who would go on to be awarded a MacArthur Fellows Genius Grant, wrote NPR's original mission statement. How did you conceive of NPR being different from commercial radio?
Because it's not about ratings, it's purpose-driven. And so I wrote, it doesn't regard its audience as a market, but as curious, complex individuals who are looking for some understanding, meaning, and joy in the human experience. It's all about connecting.
Siemering wanted people on the air to talk, to sound natural and not announce.
Bill said, be yourself. And that meant the world to me.
Stamberg's commanding voice paved the way for NPR's next 50 years.
I'm Susan Stamberg.
Many within NPR credit much of its early success to the leadership of its four founding mothers, Susan Stamberg, along with groundbreaking correspondents Linda Wertheimer,
if you want me to read, all right,
covering politics and Congress,
term limits, a balanced budget amendment, and a rolling back of the welfare state.
Rosenberger, however,
legal affairs correspondent Nina Totenberg.
When the lively hour of argument was over, all the justices except Clarence Thomas had asked many questions.
And the late congressional correspondent Cokie Roberts. One lesson of the founding mothers was to be generous with your skills.
Coming up, we'll talk to the third generation,
says All Things Considered co-host Audie Cornish.
Cokie Roberts, she called me and said, hey, kid, what's going on? How are you doing at Congress? Susan would listen to my work and give me notes, and I appreciated that.
Generosity is a word often heard around NPR, and yes, this is about those ubiquitous pledge drives.
We can't do it without your help.
Most of NPR's funding comes from corporate sponsors and from independent public radio stations around the country that buy its programming.
So please give what you can.
It's not a profit-driven enterprise, right? It's there for the greater good. And it counts on people to open up their hearts and open up their pocketbooks to help pay for it.
It'll come up full here.
Margaret Lowe began at NPR in 1982 and today is CEO of WBUR, Boston's NPR news station.
We got letters this year from people who said, I'm not working right now, but here's $25. It's the most I could give, but you mean the world to me.
In 2013, you became NPR's first full-time TV critic.
And they hired a black male to do it. I think that says something.
But even with a fiercely loyal audience of millions, Eric Deggans says there are things that NPR could do better, such as hire an even more diverse staff and produce more inclusive programming. Do you think a lot of Black Americans listen to NPR?
No, they don't. I think Black folks, we have a highly developed sense of when our culture is included in programming. NPR is not that.
The radio audience is 81% white, but Deggans says especially through podcasting, NPR is reaching new and younger listeners.
We're trying to catch up, and we're still not where we need to be.
I didn't know anybody who listened to NPR. I had literally never heard of it.
And now, Ira Glass is one of NPR's most famous graduates. Between 1978 and 1995, he did just about every job there. And today, Glass says NPR could be more open to innovative ideas on the radio.
What was happening at NPR when I first arrived there was there were a lot of people experimenting with how do we use this medium in this way that it's never been used. And it very much felt like an experiment.
His experiment, This American Life, debuted in 1995 and last year became the very first radio program to win a Pulitzer Prize.
To be clear, they're trying to follow the rules and enter the United States through a border station and formally apply for asylum.
It's not an NPR show.
That's correct.
Why not?
I wanted NPR to distribute it, but NPR didn't want to distribute it. The people who were in charge of making those decisions, they just didn't get the show. They didn't like the show. They didn't understand it.
Obviously, Glass did very well, and so does NPR. But in a world of so many choices, Susan Stamberg says what her network provides is more necessary than ever. What do you think it will take for NPR to have another 50 years?
I don't know what the future of radio programs, per se, will be. It may not be that long, but people will always listen and want to hear stories told by human voices.
By the way, the producer of this report, Sunday Morning's Jay Cornish, was himself a pioneering NPR staffer.